Hey, you're listening to the Bandwagoners. My name is Andy Cole.
And my name's Justin Boniface. We're bringing you news and notes from around the NHL.
How you doing?
Back.
Yeah, you're back. We're back. It's been, when was the last show? We were in June, I think, was it, right? Right after the Blackhawks won the Cup?
That's right.
So we should explain to people what's going on right now. If you guys are wondering why Justin sounds different than me, Justin has moved to Mackenzie, British Columbia, which for those of you that aren't familiar with the geographical location, that's like pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
It's 1,300 kilometers north of Vancouver. We're going to get snow probably in the next couple weeks here, so doing a little small town thing.
How are you liking it up there?
I'm loving it, and I'm stoked for winter. It sounds like there's lots of backyard pond stuff for hockey, and I'm going to do some snowboarding, so I'm pretty excited.
Are you getting the small town vibe from everyone? Are people just insane, like crazy about hockey up there?
Yeah, and everybody knows everybody, so it's like I've started my job already, and know a lot of people already, so that's kind of funny. But tons of hockey fans. I'm in a pool actually with about 150 people,
wow.
So that's pretty awesome. But
so that's like the entire population.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing, man. I mean, I'm really happy that we can keep the show going. Obviously, we had a lot of fun last year. That was our the lockout season was our debut season, and we had a ton of fun. Got a ton of listeners. People seem to really enjoy the show, and through the powers of Skype and technology, we are connecting with everyone again. So it's I'm looking forward to a really good year. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. I'm stoked to be doing the show again, and hopefully we can find some way to maybe improve the audio quality, but this is just kicking it off, so.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, well, how about we do this? Since I can't see you, I can't look at into your eyes and get your body language, so let's just do our very best to feed off each other here and go through the list one by one. We'll give you our predictions of how we think the teams are going to do this year. If there's any interesting stories pertaining to the teams, we can go over those as well. Obviously, the conferences are a bit different this year. They've changed the divisions. There's the Metropolitan Division, or the Metro Division as I like to call it. What are the other divisions called? You got the Atlantic, you got the Central, and the Pacific. So
yep.
Everyone else has pretty much stayed the same. The major difference is being Winnipeg is finally in the Western Conference, which is awesome for Winnipeg because they're traveling far less, and the time difference, obviously. Last year, what were they in, like the Southeast Division or something?
That's right. They were in the Southeast with Florida and Tampa Bay, and the other major moves that we finally got that I know some teams were waiting for was Detroit finally going back to the East, and Columbus as well.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a lopsidedness in the sense that there's actually a 7% better chance that the Western teams have of making the playoffs than the Eastern teams do. But hopefully that'll balance out with some teams maybe moving around, i.e. Quebec or Seattle or whatever happens. But it's nice to see that there's less travel time for those teams that just didn't make sense, like Toronto and Detroit being next door and not being in the same conference.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a lot more sense geographically. As much as I love playing Detroit, I mean, they're always such incredible games whenever we play them. They are a great team, so it's nice that we won't have to deal with them as much. And unfortunately, you guys, we should probably mention this again for the new listeners listening to the show. I'm a big Vancouver Canucks fan, and Justin, who's your team?
The Montreal Canadiens, Andy. I don't think that we're going to have many people who are unfamiliar with that. Hopefully, they can check out some of the old shows too. But yeah, diehard Habs, diehard Canucks. It gets a little bit, butting heads sometimes, but both diehards.
And we're playing you guys coming up soon, I think, sometime this month.
Well, finally we get to see some games against each other, and I mean, even though you're sad about not facing Detroit, you still get to see them because we have a full season.
Yes.
So for those of you who are joining us fresh, as Andy was saying, last year we did get to do our show, but we had planned this in August of 2011 or 2012 or whatever it was, and then we had half a season where we didn't get to do it. We had to wait on the NHL before we could get going. So I'm really excited because we get to do a full season. We get to do 82 games. Mm-hmm. We get to actually see, some teams overachieved last year and underachieved last year due to the fact that, they only had to play 40 or 50 games or whatever it was.
A really condensed schedule. And you weren't traveling back and forth conference to conference, right? The teams were playing just in their own conference last year.
Yeah, that's right. So we didn't get any of the matchups until the Stanley Cup final, which was kind of cool in one sense. But I mean, come on, we want to see more hockey.
Of course. Well, that's probably the greatest thing about this realignment, which in my opinion should have happened years ago, is that my team will play every team this year at home, so we'll get to see every team come through town. Whereas before it was like we'd see the Penguins like once every 2 years, or the Capitals once every 2 years. And I mean, it's awesome for rivalries, for fans of other teams that live in the city that can finally see all these other teams come to town, or in their case, their favorite teams come to town. So it's really bringing a lot of diversity to the league, and it's allowing the fan base to really experience the NHL fully, because you'll be able to see a lot of that talent which you just couldn't have access to before.
Yeah.
So let's go through the lists here and see what we got. So let's do the Atlantic Division first. So
okay.
In first place right now,
after 4 days,
see how long this lasts. But of course, all my friends who are Leafs fans won't let me forget this. But first place right now, you got the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're off to a 3-0 start. How do you think they'll do this year?
Well, you're making fun of the fact that they're in first, obviously, because who doesn't hate the Leafs? But at the same time, I mean, they are one of the strongest teams in the division when you look at it. I mean, Detroit's getting a bit older, and they do have a lot of talent. But Toronto has played the game of catching up with the teams that have decided to be physical. Yeah. And we've seen the last 3 or 4 years now that's what wins the Stanley Cup, is endurance and physicality and just being able to outmuscle your opponents. So Toronto and Boston, I think, are going to be atop of the Atlantic Division for the majority of the season. And obviously, as a Montreal Canadiens fan, I hope that that's not the case, because those are probably my two most hated teams. But that is the reality of the situation. The Leafs are good.
They are. I'll readily admit that. They are a good team this year, and they were a good team last year. Last year you saw the emergence of Nazem Kadri, and I have every expectation to think that he'll do well again this year. Phil Kessel always consistently gets you 30 goals. I'm sure he'll be great. You got Joffrey Lupul, James Van Riemsdyk. Most importantly, though, is they finally have a goaltender. I mean, say what you will about Reimer. Yes, he's good. I still don't know necessarily if he's your starter. He's the guy you want to have build your team around. In my opinion, Jonathan Bernier is a stud, and he's going to be a star in this league. And the Leafs finally got something they've really lacked since the days of Curtis Joseph, is a really strong goaltender.
Yeah, I mean, they did go through some stints there. I mean, they had Eddie Belfour for a while, and
the Eagle.
No one has really filled the shoes like you said, like Joseph has, and it's nice. I mean, he's still got to be tested, though. He was a backup, and we're going to have to see that. I think actually that might be one of their weak points, but obviously Bernier is excellent, and we've seen now that the NHL is about tandems, so hopefully he can form a good duo with Reimer, and we'll see what happens.
Well, much like Luongo and Schneider dealt with in Vancouver last year, hopefully Reimer and Bernier feed off each other, and knowing that there's an equally or more skilled goaltender backing you up, or playing the other, the 1A and the 1B, hopefully that will make you want to play better as well. So it very much well may be that, for the Leafs anyways, to their advantage, they have two excellent goalies that, especially come playoff time, will really help them along. Second place, you got the Boston Bruins, 2-0 so far. Same old for these guys. I think they're going to once again be a cup contender. Their roster's virtually unchanged from last year. I expect Milan Lucic to have a big year. Marchand's always dangerous. They did get rid of Sagan, which is interesting. But in the place of that, they get...
Oh, come on.
In the place of that, they get Jerome McGinley.
Well, Louis Eriksson is who they got in exchange for Sagan in the Dallas deal, and that's a great pickup. I think he fits right into the lineup and the mentality of the Boston Bruins. But
Eriksson's very underrated. Very underrated.
Of a replacement for Jágr.
Yes.
And that's who they used as their veteran presence in the playoffs last year.
Well, Eriksson is very underrated from a lot of people's perspectives. I think he's a very skilled two-way player that a lot of people seem to forget about, and he's looked really good on the first line so far, and Iginla's slotting in really nicely on the second line, and Iginla looks good so far, I gotta say. Like, he hasn't really shown a lot of age yet. I think he might have a good season.
Well, you got to compare Iginla to Alfredsson in the sense that now the two of them are in a role where all they have to do is worry about their game, and they're not the leader in the dressing room, obviously, like they were. They're still a presence, but it doesn't ride on their shoulders. They're not the star of the city that they're in. They have a new role to play, and it fits more in line with their abilities now. There's less pressure, and they just get to play. And so I think we're going to see great success from Jerome Iginla this season, because he's right where he needs to be.
Yeah, no, I would fully expect Boston to have another very good year, and just like the Maple Leafs, I'm sure the playoffs are a shoo-in for those guys, and I would expect the Bruins to go deep once again. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of them, being a Canucks fan. Obviously, we have our rivalries, but I think the Bruins are going to have an excellent year. And I'm sure you hate for me to say that as well, being a Habs fan.
Yeah, well, like I said, when we started with Toronto, as a Habs fan, there's no way. It's not easy for me to say that. So both of those teams have convinced me that they are huge contenders in our division, and it's going to be tough to make the playoffs. You're going to need 90, 95 points, as we've seen for the past year since the lockout. So.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely, I agree with you. Third place, you got the Red Wings. They're 2-1 so far. The Wings just keep rolling along. Like, we say this every year, oh, they're getting older. But honestly, like, they always seem to balance their youth with their older guys so well that they never seem to miss a beat. Like, they're always a dangerous team. They're a consummate playoff performer. I'm sure, once again, they'll make the playoffs this year. I'd be very surprised if they didn't. They probably themselves got the biggest offseason acquisition in Daniel Alfredsson, which for a lot of people, that just rocked the hockey world. Like, people were not prepared for Alfredsson to leave the Senators. They thought he would sign one final contract, and that would be it, and he'd retire as a Sen. So picking up Alfredsson for Detroit was a huge acquisition for them.
It does, because the main thing for me is it brings familiarity to the roster, to the Eastern Conference. Because what you're going to have to look at is, I'm going to play the devil's advocate on this and say that Detroit is actually going to be one of the struggling teams in this division. They're not going to be near the bottom like Buffalo, not like Tampa might or Florida might. But you got all three Canadian teams in this division are going to be contenders: Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto, and they know the division. You got to think that Jimmy Howard has to learn about all of these new shooters that he's never faced. Not only has he not faced them in 2 years, but even when he did face them 2 seasons ago, it was 1 or 2 games, and that was it. He might not have even started if the backup did. So you got to get used to a whole different style of hockey. You've been tossed into this new division. You got a couple preseason games under your belt, and away we go.
But flip side that,
it's going to be a challenge, I think, for the Detroit Red Wings, and it might wear them down over the season.
But you're Mike Babcock right now. Pretend you're Mike Babcock, which means I must be terrified of you because he's scary as all hell. Pretend you're Mike Babcock. Doesn't that equally play an advantage to you in some ways? Because other teams in your division don't know what you're about. Because just like you not having faced them, they haven't faced you either, right? So they got to learn about you as well. So let
me give it to you this way. If you're going to a party, you're with a bunch of people you've never met before, you have to remember 25
Why would I be
new
doing
name,
that?
And those people have to remember one new name. So look at that way for the Detroit Red Wings. You do have an advantage for those games in that scenario, but those other teams are just playing day in and day out against the teams that they have rivalries against. The Detroit Red Wings, every game pretty much is doing research. They're gonna love their road trips out west.
Yeah, and you know that's a very good analogy. I never thought of it like that. Must be showing you how much of a loser I am. I guess I don't go to parties with lots of people that I don't know. Sorry, Mr. Boniface, Mr. Popularity over there. King of Mackenzie.
In a new town too, Andy,
yeah.
So.
They're all secretly Habs fans, and you're just getting along great.
Actually, that is a great thing about the small town. I will add that in is a bunch of diversity. Obviously, I've got a few knuckleheads up here, but other than that, you got Red Wings, Bruins fans, a lot of Original Six stuff going on. I've seen Leafs jerseys, Habs jerseys, so it's really quite cool to be in a mixed city and not have any strong bias one way or the other. It's really neat.
So you're saying the average level of intelligence is a little bit lower then? Is that what you're getting at right now? Or?
Well, so all I'm saying is they cheer for winners, Andy. I'm sorry about your Canucks, and that every time I have to express something good about hockey, you have to take a bitter stab because you're a Canucks fan.
I kid because I love. One thing I will say with the Alfredsson thing, which makes me laugh even more, is Detroit and Ottawa are in the same division. So imagine you're a Sens fan right now. You're still probably absolutely livid that you didn't re-sign Alfie, the face of your franchise, a pillar of the community, and now you're going to be seeing the guy like 10 times a year. Like, this is not boding well if you're a Sens fan right now.
And especially, I mean, when I'm thinking about my playoff predictions here, could you, like, first round, Ottawa, Detroit?
Oh, my God.
Oh, man. So good. So good.
Oh, that would be an absolutely epic match, and we just hope the hockey gods are listening, and they will make that happen, because that would be one hell of a match. I gotta say, you're getting me excited about the playoffs already, and that's like 8 months away.
Like a true hockey fan, Andy.
Oh, you know it. All right, so moving along. Oh, I guess before we should stop, we should also mention that Detroit. I like the signing actually, and he's got 1 goal already. Detroit also picked up Stephen Weiss from Florida, and very good player, very good second line center. He's a guy that the Canucks were actually coveting for quite a while, and it was thought that Florida was going to re-sign him, and it just didn't end up happening. And he's been really good for them so far as well. So I mean, between Alfredsson and Weiss, is it Weiss? Basinger. I think it is Weiss. You're right. For Weiss and Alfredson, I think
he's German, so for sure.
Okay, well, sehr gut. That's a good pickup then for Detroit, and I think those two guys are just only making them stronger. You got young guys like Nyquist really coming into their own, even without Bruce.